So now let's move into the center, or become centered, by describing what's happening within the middle dantian. So in the context of becoming centered, we can look right here underneath of the spiral and kind of what represents the experience of the heart as we go through life is the term Zhong Dantian, which means the central dantian. And the idea of dantian, again, can be construed as a location, and sometimes that's going to be helpful. But in this sense of dantian, or the field of cultivation, it's everything that's going to be happening between the part of you that speaks and the part of you that breathes, and everything you feel, and all of the experiences that go through feeling and thought, and a bit of your perspective. There's this conversation that we'll come to in a minute about the ox herder or cow herder and the weaving girl, and obviously they're the sort of yin and yang sides of the capacity for us to become centered. So when we speak about all of the things that are happening here, they're all in the context of coming back to the embodied stillness of being profoundly centered. Now, in this moment, you and I can decide to really feel the front, back, left, right, up and down of how we're relating with gravity if you're standing up. There's more dynamic if you're sitting down. It's still one of those things in practice you're always getting closer to, but you're never going to get 100%, completely exactly right. So it's always about becoming centered. So when you speak about Zhong Dantian, becoming centered, the middle Dantian, more than anything, we're describing many processes and many moving parts that need to be in perfect balance for the moving parts to hit a kind of harmony, if you will, for that centeredness to be something we can stay with and reside in and kind of rely on, or perhaps predict in a way, so that we know how to feel into our practice. And I say this many, many times, the body is the mind before the mind is the mind. So if the body isn't still and at peace within the residence of your whole felt sense state, there's almost no chance at all that your mind is going to be open, clear, and available to things that are beyond your normal perception. So inside this spiral, that's happening around the heart, and there's this sort of cascade or profuse amount of blood spilling around the heart, which definitely implies that, life can be hard, and there's hard days, and there's challenging people, and there's a lot of perhaps poking between human beings that you could say on a certain energetic level make us kind of bleed a little bit in the sense that we've been hurt. So many other aspects that could come from the Buddhist point of view around suffering as well. So we don't want to identify with that. We want to follow this spiraling path into the center of the heart, which is the mind, which is the body. And together these things kind of describe what it is to be Huang Ting, or in the yellow court, where all of the things in the universe, they kind of spiral around that. So in the residence of the center of that, we're equally aware of everything, equally aware of the four directions, the four seasons, the four oceans, because we're right in the middle of it all. And then by that I mean it all. Of life, the noble and beyond. But we have to go through the difficult parts of thought and feeling to get to the center of that. And addiction, you could say, is the opposite, because we're compensating for distress, existential pain, visceral pain, other things, and need that feeling to go away. So in a way, that's kind of like self-defense, bad feeling, go away. But it's not actually ever going to win. Because we can only push those things away as they mount and increase and kind of consume our lives that way. So just as an example, perhaps a nudging invitation, if you love your phone a lot more than your meditation, or you're using any aspect of your life addictively to compensate for the challenges we face as, feeling beings. I keep mentioning, see a therapist, get some acupuncture, go as deep as you can, find teachers and teachings that carry you all the way through your practice from day one until there's no one to count days anymore, in the good sense, not in the, end of life sense. So here we are journeying to the center of the beingness, the mind, the heart. And what's written down here is Gan Tu zhe Tian. So Gan Tu is, one person would say a misspelling when someone was writing it down. They thought a person said gun and they said zhen, because zhen tu is the true soil, that sort of Taoist alchemic medium point or transitional point of being in profound stillness, like imagine a bag of sand being opened and cast away into outer space, and all the particles are just completely separate and unique and on their own, and the space between them is just space, and there's no five elements anymore. There's just the soil of diffuse, languorous, profound stillness. And that's sort of the joke about lying in a hammock and softening until you fall through it, perhaps as sand or the dust of letting the body go, as just an example of the quality of sensation that true soil, is about. Some people say Gan Tu is describing the trigram Gan or Zhan, which is the idea of mountain. And if you put the trigram for mountain over earth, it describes that meditation that I was talking about, where you feel the mountain below the earth, you feel the mountain above the land. You are the mountain over unbelievable amounts of time, always moving upward, always becoming mountain-like. But you're also the result of the erosion of the mountain, creating all of the soil and the land or the earth around it. And although this may not be accurate to how geology works, it's a very, very beautiful mountain or a very beautiful meditation that is an invitation to the true soil. It's sort of one of the first steps in that practice, or a good example of it. So it's why I bring it up a lot. So the Gan Tu zhe Tian, this field is very much like, or brought into being by, that state of Zhen Tu, the true soil, or that mountain meditation, which you can do actually even just looking at those trigrams on a wall, or just maybe even get a picture of a big mountain in a desert somewhere, and just imagine that all the sand in the desert is the result of, I don't know, a million years of time of mountains moving into a good meditation posture and erosion taking care of, the surface of things. So this gets us clear with that part of it. And again, when we speak about felt sense, true soil, we're talking about the embodied part of this. Worth noting, body, mind. There's yin and yang happening here. So just quickly, up in this part here is a statement that is fairly tricky in the sense of Taoist terminology and is often translated quite literally. So I'll translate it a bit literally first and then kind of nudge us towards what might be meant. So in Chinese, this quote here says, Wu shi jing nei yin quan. And this can be translated literally as the mysterious past is hidden inside of 50 regions. And that kind of makes sense in a way if we look at it literally. So here we have this statement of Xuanguan, which is the mystery gates, or to look through the unknowable, in any point of awareness or through embodied awareness or anything like that. So that mystery gate also implies the Sanquan, the three narrow passes or difficult places to open in the body, or the context that we are going to move through some difficult passes, and we have to face those, like getting through what's around the heart, to actually open up the more innate or inborn or birthright aspects of energetic cultivation, circulation, anatomy, and alignment that we need to be a good antenna, to be connected to those things. So there's this, allusion to the mystery gate, to the center of the center in an embodied way. But a funny thing about the character Wu Shi, or 5, 10, or what you might think of as 50, and how people might take the number as an indication of things, because Westerners can't stop themselves from doing that, because that's how English works. We just default to they must be talking about 50 regions, 50 places where there's maybe 50 mystery gates, and maybe that's true. 50,000 could also be true. drum roll please. The thing I'm sort of sneaking up on here is the term Wu Shi 510 is a sort of Taoist nudge to the difference between pre-heaven and post-heaven, the incomplete and the complete things that we can actually attend to and practice. So Wu Shi Jing Nai, the 510 inner kind of regions or residences or places that we actually may find ourselves, is basically saying you want to meditate inwards on the experience and the way you feel, the part of you that is post-heaven, the part of you that is interacting with the world as you, and the part of you that's actually reaching through that glove, the numinous, Ling, Hun, Po, that's coming into you, that's still about you, but in the pre-heaven, so that we can begin to have an awareness and a trust in both the 5 and the 10, the post-heaven, the pre-heaven. And as we get deeper and deeper into the way cultivation works, until we have that consolidated Jing, until it's formed enough around the competence of a Dantian or the capacity or the Gong of your Dantian, you can't really, it's unlikely perhaps, to ignite a connection with and the transformational influence and capacity and mystery of when the pre-heaven Qi and Yang starts to actually change your Jing into something more refined. There's parts you can do, and a lot of that is waiting. And this gives you a bit of a nudge that the Zhen Tu, the true soil state in the somatic sense, step 1, step other with consciousness is conditioned awareness, yes, unconditioned awareness, hello, knock, 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 who's there? And in staying aware of both, then we're not stuck with, again, against or that quality of, good and bad. We're like, yes, this is, and yes, of course, let's see what this other quality of consciousness may be like, I suppose. So that gets us into being what centered implies and what becoming aware implies. So now I'm going to speak a little bit about this cow herding boy and this weaver girl and what that's all about, because it's kind of important, if not crucial, to the practice. So right above the cow herding boy's head, it says Niu Lang Qiao Xing. So Yulang is the cow herder. Qiaoxing is an opening to something in the sky, or something recognizable in the sky, like a constellation. Now, one thing to consider about this, again, because it's assuming you have a practice, you have a teacher, you have a tradition, and you're ready to kind of go into building foundation for alchemy, so you're not looking at astrology, although that's a cool thing to look at. It's a reminder that consciousness has this rather necessary and challenging capacity to recognize things and see if they're relevant. In the Shaolin tradition of wall staring meditation, you stare at a wall, especially a wall with texture, to kind of have fun with your mind finding puppies and horses and dragons in the wood grain of a wall. Just like when we look at clouds and we see, cloud watching, and you see whatever you see in the clouds, you're recognizing something your mind already can see and knows what it is and has a name for. So in the cow herder, the mind, in a specific way, is looking into the sky, the numinous, the beyond. The thing that we need to keep looking through and beyond is anything we can have a name for, and it's just part of the mind. The mind is like a clock, and if you can't stop the mind from going recognition, that's a horse, then you're going to remember horses, think about stories about horses, and you're off to the races, pardon the pun, with the mind just doing what the mind is going to do. So, challenge of the mind is we're looking into the unknowable, and as soon as something knowable shows up, just go, oh, well, what's around the corner from, or beyond that and beyond that. Which is why Xuan, beyond the beyond the profound. Because even if it's profound, you recognize it's profound. to you because there's a story. Off we go. So the cowherder looks into the sky and is in the center of a somewhat perhaps wounded or experienced heart. And there's something else that's implied here, and why we have this cowherder here as a young, adolescent boy. And it has to do with, and I think this is one of the most useful things to really consider, most of our raw emotional experience, our raw emotional reactions, our deeply instinctual, say good and bad days in the sense of how we've lived our lives, there's a core aspect of our innate self that's just trying to move through and learn as we live our lives. And that part of us is innocent like a little cowherder looking into the sky, wondering what's beyond the stories, what's before the myth, what's before the bulls and the dragons and the people with spears and belts. And sorry, I don't know almost anything at all about astrology, but that's a left brain part of the experience. Cool. But we want to move, through and beyond that. And the challenge of the storytelling mind is to recapitulate our woundedness, as we release certain pain in the embodied self. That pain has to move through something, and we want to interpret the meaning of that. And that's going to probably take 10 or 20 years. But if we can allow those feelings and those stories and a lot of that experience to be a representation of the innocence of perhaps urgent moments, then we can give up on, at some point, or maybe give up is maybe the wrong word, but choose to move beyond the recapitulation process. And the recapitulation process is also implied here, especially if you follow the tradition like the Yida Huanyuan tradition, where we're trying to do this to heal a self before we move beyond having a self, which we'll learn about in the training. So, cowherder constellation, which may or may not need to be an actual constellation. Then we have this connection to the Big Dipper. Connecting to the Big Dipper is one of the oldest Taoist practices, where you actually feel a line as an imagined kind of laser beam or string or something between your Dantian or any of your Dantian and the actual North Star. And you can play with that in many, many ways, which we'll learn about later. So that is also a practice about how we orient ourselves to the world, staying connected to source, inwards and outwards, if there is an inwards and outwards in some ways. And that relationship brings up something very specific. So above the upside down Big Dipper here is another statement that says, 克使而通八关川, which basically means, in engraving the stone, the lad holds a string of cash. As you may expect, there's hidden meaning with this. So engraving the stone has a symbolic meaning that isn't about actually engraving a shape into a stone. It's meant to be kind of a double entendre of, instead of taking the stone and trying to make the stone more of the recognizable, what may be implied, or it's been suggested to me, is engraving the stone actually means polishing the mirror. And at first it's going to feel like you're trying to find something that's worth the effort, like engraving something into a stone. At a certain point, though, polishing the mirror is just the daily, process of, you could say, grinding it away at the rough things, and then the smaller things, and then the smaller things, until, like, if you're actually trying to grind a stone into something shiny, you have to have that kind of patience, that kind of consistency, and the willingness to see the lumpy big things for what they are, and the smaller things and the smaller things, and the first shiny things in the sense of what's mirrored back to you, as just more and more things, until the mirroring part of it becomes a reunion, right? So if you look into a mirror, you are looking at you, and then there's stories. There's also the sense that at a certain point there's no separation or observer or observed. You're just in the immediacy of the surface of the pupil of your eyeballs and the surface of the mirror. They become the same moment, the same perception. So there is no one and. So polishing the mirror has that. And the idea of coming up with a string of cash, and some people would say the Big Dipper here kind of represents a very worthwhile outcome, with respect to how much cash. The string of cash actually also is sort of, I wouldn't say a code word, but a reminder that you can, and just in case you don't know this, people used to carry their money around on strings, which is why Chinese money has a hole in the middle, or used to, and different strings of different coins were kind of like larger, like a $5 bill, $10 bill, and things like that. So string of cash is sort of a cultural awareness of the amount of value in something, but it's also a line of individual experiences or individual interactions. And the idea here is that in polishing the mirror, in doing the practice, in some of the things that are implied over here about the numinous sprouts, or the moments of pre-heaven coming into the post-heaven through our practice, that's the string of cash. It's also the idea that if you unearth the more challenging parts of your experience, and the polishing of your stone and the unearthing of any kind of pain in life, those things will eventually transform into nuggets of wisdom, nuggets of gold, and gold in the context of how you actually relate to yourself and future stones, and how you interact with the people in your life in a much more beneficial, patient, and compassionate way. So this is what we're being asked to relate to beyond the astrology left brain into there is no constellation, because there is no form beyond form. And the journey of that is going to be a process, and it's great to celebrate the process, to locate ourselves in the places that we need to during that process. But also, like all processes, it eventually comes to a reunion. Right? So imagine that for a moment, because in one part of meditation we actually reside at the surface of the pupils as a kind of coherent present moment, in the sense of light is moving from outside of you to inside of you in that one cellular layer. So that's the immediacy of presence in a felt sense kind of way. So if you're looking at yourself in a mirror, what would happen if your immediate present felt sense got so close to the reflection that the reflection was no longer a reflection? It was just that complete immediacy, right? So that's sort of what we're being hinted to. So from here we want to go down and have a conversation about this Weaver Girl and how important this part of the document is. So quickly again, there's several statements in here that have to do with the spiritual states and kind of nicknames, if you will, of some of your internal organs, and why that's important I'll come back to. But down over here is this little short quote that says, "Zhi nu yuan zhuan." And that can translate into English basically as, "The weaving maiden is transporting and transferring." So before I get into where all that goes, because it's quite a bit, keep in mind that right here is the diaphragm. So she isn't placed there by accident. Everything that's going on with that aspect of practice relies on breath work and that kind of level plane of the diaphragm and the opening of, say, the 12-storied pagoda, the rib cage, interacting directly with your perineal floor, the water wheel, and many other things. So you could say this part of practice is the pivot between really interacting simultaneously with the core lower dantian energetic work and practices and building of qi, and everything that may simultaneously or eventually occur with respect to that. So diaphragm breathing, very important. This is the second mysterious path called jiaji, which is the tension around the spine behind the diaphragm, as well as a couple of ligaments in the diaphragm that are directly connected to a part of your survival nervous system and your adrenal glands and some of the other functions in your lower body. from a medical point of view. So very, very, very undisputably loaded part of your experience. And this is kind of your solar plexus in the sense of butterflies in your stomach and anxiety and survival stuff. So again, she's right in the middle of that. Between that and your liver, which is all these growing trees. And if you're familiar with Chinese medicine, liver, assertion, connection with Hun, the collective unconscious, your ancestors, and not only that, but how you actually move through life. You know, we think of wood as growing plants. They're going up and down. They're always reaching for something. They're always growing in a way to get where they're going. So it's how we grow and how we go that's going to define the balance of the journey, because a tree can't grow upwards faster than it grows downwards, you know. And I always want to bring up this example because we always see this in cities where a bit of grass has grown between two pieces of sidewalk and breaks through, and although it's not literally true, we can kind of have a moment of like, oh my god, that little piece of grass is strong enough to like move giant rocks. And that is in a way true, because you can see trees grow through and split like an entire cliff or something. But the reason I'm bringing up that imagery, though, is just to be aware that, again, just like we were talking up here with kind of how chi wounds happens, if your assertion isn't balanced with rootedness and all of the other qualities of your embodied practice, it isn't regulated in a balanced way in the qualities of breathing and all of the different practices you have. If you haven't balanced that, you can move upwards too fast and maybe go crazy. You can drain your kidneys in a hurry, thinking you're getting somewhere, but eventually you just fall over because you don't have any roots. And about 50 other fun little metaphors. So again, very important place within the career of your practice. So when we think of the weaving girl and this idea of transferring, transporting, at first that really has to do with all of the interaction of the primary organs of your body and whether or not they're sharing jing, qi, blood, nutrients, you know, your bone marrow becoming your blood, becoming the anchoring capacity for your spirit to reside, and all of the things that have to do with healthy physiology, balanced physiology. So a part of that is moving things around. A part of that also implies the flexibility and bamboo-like quality of your spine. Remember all the elongation things I keep referring to that allow your actual embodiment and approach to practice to be resilient like bamboo. So that's a part of, you know, her nature. Now, there's another aspect of this with, again, the idea of the weaving girl, the warp and weft of any kind of blanket or fabric. That comes back to the character here for Qing, which is this idea of the actual warp and weft of the body as meridians, as the universe in the fabric of space-time kind of sense. So when we think of that, we're also thinking of all the aspects and all of the filaments of your perception, which can go down to every microcellular filament of collagen if you want to take it to the microanatomy relationship with meridians and what we're anchored in Qigong practice, or what the I Jin Qing skills in Daoyin or Qigong practice might be talking about. So we can reach into that, and I would nod and say that's definitely something that has to do with the warp and weft of certain qualities of practice, for sure. Another aspect of that, again, if we think about the kind of space-time part, is that those little strings, those little filaments, are filaments of perception. So in the weaving, the transferring and transporting, we're also making sure that as we're reaching out as everything in the direction of everything, to move beyond the idea of location, to just become the you could say the field or the local environment of space-time, you know, which could be your living room or it could be I don't know, a few billion galaxies or something. But again, it's like taking true soil into a different kind of residing into the slowest moving rhythms within state and within felt sense state and within the tissue body. And within how we reach in everywhere and every when with perception. So some things to play with there. Another aspect of this has to do with this ancient story of the cowherd boy and the weaver girl meeting in some circumstances and falling in love, and then being cursed because of Chinese cultural stuff, which I'm not going to get into, that they can only meet once a year, and there's actually a celebration in Chinese culture for the day when the two lovers can meet in the sky and finally, hold on to each other. And yin and yang, you could say, meet in a very innocent, very powerful, very kind of the quality of love that has to do with kind of being in love and having a crush on someone, which is a very unique quality of perception and love. We sometimes use the word san as appreciative attention and discernment in meditative practice, to just be in that state of appreciation. And that's actually the tradition and the practice that leads to the inner smile qigong that a lot of people practice today. So we have this great cultural story, the reunion of yin and yang, this built-up sort of separation of potentials coming together in an innocent way, in a youthful way, in a crush-like appreciative way. And if you're a very serious person, and sometimes I can be serious, it's a very valuable thing sometimes to just remember what it's like to be in that part of relationship when you have a crush on someone, when every little dimple and nuance and noise that they make just makes every little fiber in your being excited, because everything about them excites you. So that quality of appreciation, there's an innocence there. You can't look at someone and have a crush on them while you're judging them and everything they've ever done, right? So, well, maybe you can, I don't know. I'm trying to make a point here about appreciation. So that's another invitation with this around yin and yang and the innocence of this. And that also brings our awareness to something fundamental to Taoist practice, which we call Xingming Shuangshu, which is the dual cultivation of Xing, your innate nature, and Ming, your what I'll call potential for aliveness. And there's a lot to that teaching. In fact, there are some people who spend the first, say, several years just doing Xingming Shuangshu before they even really dive into the more sit down and meditate daily practices. So Xing has to do with your innate nature, or the aspects of your conscious nature that are your birthright or before you're born. And that's actually a part of that character. Xing can mean the mind you were born with, or just on the border between the knowable mind and the unborn mind. So Xing is this thing of, what are we really? Who am I really? What is the nature of existence? What is the nature of the universe? But also, what is my innate nature? And that whole process goes from Xing, in the sense of Xing and Ming, to Xing Gong, which are all the practices that we can do to refine that experience, that understanding, and that awareness, to a few other stages that eventually becomes Yuan Xing, or actually existing as the origin or the source of the innate nature that's moving through you and through all things. In the sense of consciousness. And Ming, being your aliveness potential, has a lot to do with your physical vitality, but it also, because again Chinese culture has a unique take on things, Ming can also be translated as destiny, or your fortune, or your good fortune, or your not so good fortune. And when it comes to your aliveness, your vitality, your fertility, your mojo, the fun you can have, your physical form and things like that, that's all defined by, and perhaps limited by, in some ways, your Ming. So again, that's one reason why Ming can be thought of as your destiny, because it's your allotment of life, the number of days you're going to be here, how anchored in your virility and vitality you may be for all of those days, or just a few of those days. It also invites us into Ming Hong, the practices like Yong Sheng Fa and other things to cultivate vitality, to conserve whatever your allotment of potency and aliveness is, so your practice can go on for a long time. So again, there's Ming and Ming Gong, there's Shen Ming, there's Yuan Ming, the original Ming. And again, these are sort of mental and perceptual games that we can play to improve our consistency around the practices we have, and to keep moving within the idea of a process to make some progress. So that's another aspect of that's held here between the herding boy and the weaver girl, is the fact that we have this dual nature, and as adults, as perhaps grumpy adults or once bitten, twice shy adults, we sometimes approach things with a bit of a grudge, and there's an invitation here to go back to the inner smile, the innocence, that just fall in love with the whole thing all over again. Crush. Make sure that you're practicing consistently, so that when you have a really good practice, which, you'll have good days and less good days, perhaps in some context, and that when they happen is really up to you. And we have our half-shrunk cauldrons and other things that remind us, we can keep cooking the soup, but it's only going to taste right when it's ready to taste right. So one other thing that is in this part of the document that surprises people, because they would think it's down here, says this: Tian Gong di Zhong Tian, which translates to the iron ox plowing the field where coins are sown. So here's the ox with its tiller, I think it's called, opening the soil, unearthing things, and that's a big part of a quality of meditation, which I'll speak to in a lot more detail when we finish this up down here. But it's up here because this whole part of the process relies on what's going on down here, and the thing that keeps this whole thing moving simultaneously is that ox-like stamina, that ox-like patience, that ox-like consistency, to be tilling along, the soil and unearthing things. And, that literal translation of bringing up coins is kind of an affirmation to what we might experience up here as consciousness. But this alludes to the physical state of actually just carrying something or pulling something or doing something for a very, very long time, in such a way that it's just how we walk. It's just how we carry ourselves. Now, we could all walk around imitating a very tired ox that's been enslaved to drag a piece of metal through the ground and take it in some very strange contemporary way, or almost a cartoonish, humorous way. Or we can remind ourselves, yeah, that's true of life, that's true of breathing, that's true of finding food and eating food. Modern life's pretty easy, and for most of us, in the sense that, we can just keep the things moving that need to keep moving, but our attitude and our patience and our consistency and perhaps our playfulness. This ox might, bust a move once in a while. It might even be doing Qigong all day. So we have a chance, as we go from mind to body, to make sure that we're anchored in a mind, thoughts, feelings, all the existential what-if stuff. We're anchored in an attitude and an embodiment that is about aliveness and about patience, and about how to anchor ourselves in that felt sense, in a kind of persistence, but a spiritual persistence, and perhaps a playful persistence, and perhaps a 24/7 Qigong persistence. So again, mind, body meet in that place and agree that that is probably the place where practice is alive and progress is possible. You can't just sit in the mind, kind of like a person living in a penthouse going, geez, I wish someone would clean the basement. So the yin-yang reunion, the Xingming reunion, the mind-body reunion, the spirit, the mind, the body, reunifying in state, but in felt sense, somatic persistence and patience. And I keep saying playfulness because playfulness is kind of important. So a couple of other things to do here, which I'm going to do in a slightly different way, is to translate this part of the document, which I did in the overview, but I'm going to do again here, and then to talk about the spiritual states and names of the organs. So what I'm going to do with that is actually just record that on audio and use some imagery behind the audio as I go through that. I'm not going to go very deep into that because it's kind of Pandora's box of translations and meanings and people moving characters around depending on if the person was probably writing down these notes. with somebody else using Chinese terminology that has the same sound, different character. So this can get into a very academic, perhaps contest about what was actually meant to be written or what they really mean. So I'm just going to be kind of playful and quick with this and give you a sense of why that information's on here as well. And then we can finish up with the very few things to say that are happening down here, primarily the simultaneous interactions that include everything, the way we relate to the process, and the 3 or 4 things that we actually want to be interacting with in the lower Dantian. And then you will have a complete translation, at least from the tradition I carry, of the Nei Jing Tu. And if you're interested, I would invite you to come and join me in the training. If you're wanting to either learn the Zhuji, the building a foundation in this tradition, because you already have learned it in another way, or if you have never learned all of that and would like to.